Hey everyone, welcome back. Today we'd like to have a look at Rolex. Huge news for Rolex and for the watch industry and for investors in practical timepieces, luxury timepieces. Rolex acquisition of Bucherer signals a new era for luxury watches. So 3 generations of Bucherers built an exclusive watch and jewelry retailer that sold expensive timepieces and glittering gems to the world rich and famous for more than a century. The Swiss billionaire behind the eponymous luxury boutique, Chairman George G. Bucherer, has agreed to sell Bucherer AG to Rolex in a move that has stunned the watch retailing world and the overall industry and the stocks and shares market as well. Now, I do like the idea of investing in timepieces. I do invest in Watches of Switzerland. Again, it's a boutique. They don't actually sell their own watches, as far as I believe, but they do sell other retailers' watches, such as Rolex, such as IWC. I do like IWC watches. And let me just declare that this is not financial advice, but I'm just being open. This is something that I'm genuinely interested in. I wrote an article on this as well. It is on our Monument blog. Feel free to check this out. Now, this has recently become the reality in fine watchmaking with Rolex acquisition of Bucherer on August 24th. This is an event that will shape the industry for years to come. I believe that, and many others tend to believe this as well. Now, for some, this serves as a warning, a reminder that staying static is not an option. Admittedly, genius is frequently overused, yet in this instant, it is certainly applicable for Rolex, global leader in luxury watches, to purchase Bucherer, the world's biggest watch retailer. Now, just to get an understanding of how dominant Rolex is, let's just take a look. Now, Rolex tends to manage a large amount of the watch industry. Now, originally back in 2020, it was just around 23%. I'm afraid by now, it's roughly around 30% of the watch market. Rolex is a huge player in that space. Richmond account for 19.5%. Swatch accounts for 19.8%. I'm not sure what Swatch is, but we can check that out. So it looks like Swatch is another major retailer. I've actually seen their logo before, but I'm not too familiar with them. It looks like they're a big player in the space as well. You've got LVMH, I think that's Louis Vuitton. You've got Party Philippe. You've got PK, you've got Richard Mille, you've got Breitling, and you've got some other watchmakers such as IWC. You can see Rolex takes up a huge amount of the market, and surprisingly, the most annoying thing about being a Rolex purchaser is the waiting time. You can't just walk into a Rolex store and buy a Rolex immediately. That's virtually impossible. You have to be on a waiting list. You've got to wait like a year or two in order for the watch to be manufactured. It's a process. It's not as easy as it looks. Now, immediately as the market heard about what Rolex did, Rolex bought Bucherer. It was a big move by Rolex. It immediately had an effect on the rest of the market. The market, such as Watches of Switzerland, they're a huge group. They sell watches around the world. They're a boutique. They have quite a lot of stores. They're an extremely valuable company at 1.38 billion in market cap, and it used to be more. Right now, the price of the stock is £5.74. Now, while this might say 574, it is because Google, unfortunately, didn't put that dot. That's Google's fault. But if we go over to TradingView, we'll see that it says £5.19 GBP, Great British Pound. So it has taken a huge dip. Now, bear in mind, I was actually doing well because I bought one of these shares and I was actually doing well for the past month or so. It was actually going up, but it has suddenly gone back down quite a bit. And I'm surprisingly happy with this because now that means I can buy 5-10 more shares for a discount because the watches market is actually surprisingly predictable. I don't know about the rest of you, but I find this market to be surprisingly predictable. If I look over the last year for this watch company, there was times back in 2020 December, the price was actually above $10, twice as much valuable than it is right now. This is one of the lowest periods in its history. So this is actually one of the best times to buy. So this is Watches of Switzerland, of course. This is their website. They sell Rolexes, they sell Patek Philippe, they sell Longines, they sell Omega. I'm not even sure if I'm pronouncing some of these correctly. They sell Cartier, they sell Tudor. I believe Tudor is owned by Rolex, by the way. So Rolex owns Tudor, now they own Bucherer. So you get the point. Watches of Switzerland, they sell a great deal of watches. Now here's where it gets interesting. If we check out the investors page, which I am an investor, for the fiscal year 2023, it looks like they've made already 1.5 billion. Now that's 1,543 million. They've wrote it in such a funny way. In terms of free cash flow, it's 146 thus far. The return on capital employed is 27.9%, almost 28%. But it gets even more interesting. They've got quite a handful of information, such as their most sold watches, such as Rolex, Omega, Cartier, Patek Philippe, and the list goes on. IWC is up there as well. Hugo Boss, Hublot is up there. Targoya, Tudor. Now, thankfully, Google does provide some additional information on this company. If we look at this company annual returns, like we're looking at so far this year, they've already earned $1.54 billion. Sorry, that's pound, by the way, that's pound. Back in 2019, it was only 773 million. That's 2019. That's what, 4 years ago? That's 4 years ago. They've doubled their income somehow. So that's quite impressive. Now, net income has also been growing quite a lot. Net income, back in 2019, it was minus 1.77 million. 2020, it was 507,000. That was a net income. It was 50 million a year later in 2021. And in 2022, it doubled to 101 million. And this year thus far, it's 121.8 million. And I do wonder if the Rolex situation will have an impact. But the article I wrote surprisingly gives us a great deal of information on this subject. Now, the cash flow is actually quite interesting. Like I said, back in 2019, they weren't doing so well in terms of the overall company revenue, because if we look at net income, it was down. But also, if you look at free cash flow, that was down by a lot, almost 15 million in minus. A year later, 38 million free cash flow. But it had a really unpredictable 2021 in cash flow. It was only 3.2. So I think something happened there that we might need to investigate a little bit further. Perhaps there was a big payout to shareholders. You never know. I mean, it would make a lot of sense. But then for the next 2 years, 2022 and 2023, it's been steady. Just under 30 million in free cash flow last year and just over 30 million this year in free cash flow. And the year hasn't finished yet. So year-to-year change in net income is up 20%. Cash from operations is up 24.4%. Cash flow investing is down 8.4%. Cash from financing is down 52.9%. Now, I believe financing is like when you take out debt. If they're taking out less debt, if they're getting less finance because they're taking out less debt, that's a good thing, right? But maybe I'm wrong. I might need to look into that a little bit more. Net change in cash, 2.35%. Free cash flow is down minus 1.59%. So that's a quick look at what's going on with Watches of Switzerland. But this is a huge deal for Rolex. Rolex is not a public company. Bucherer is not a public company. In fact, nothing to do with Rolex is public. It's all private. And I get that. I completely get that. Now, an estimate analyst put nearly sales at Bucherer greater than 100 stores at roughly 2 billion Swiss francs, 2.3 billion in dollars. This has led to an estimated enterprise value of around 4 billion Swiss franc, with a contribution of around 5% to Rolex sales. The decision by 88-year-old Bucherer to part ways with his century-held family company astonished many due to the exclusion surrounding both watchmakers who've had deep relations for decades. Rolex declared in a statement about the contract His decision was driven by the absence of direct descendants, and that was quite interesting. So this is where it gets even more interesting. Well, what does that mean? It simply means he doesn't have an heir. He doesn't have a son or a daughter, someone to pass on his legacy to. So, what better option than to sell it off to Rolex? However, here's my question. Does he have any other family that can hold a position within the company, perhaps 5, 10%? Or will they hold a position in Rolex, 5, 10% in Rolex? Will some of the payouts be paid within Rolex private shares that are held by private investors? Yeah, on full details, we don't really know. But you can see how much it's affected the market. It might even affect the market even more. And Watches of Switzerland has also issued a statement, noted that the decision by Rolex was not strategic, but rather in response to succession difficulties at Bucherer, as 86-year-old George Bucherer, the grandson of the founder, does not have any descendants. That's remarkably sad. And my question is, does he have any other family member? This is such an unusual but sad situation to be in. It's like you can have all the riches and the money in the world, but if you don't have your family, that can be quite troublesome. Now, HSBC has downgraded Watches of Switzerland rating from buy to hold due to the fact that Rolex accounts for more than half its business. Yeah, Rolex accounts for a lot. Erwin Romberg, HSBC analyst, warned of potential detrimental scenario. The possibility that Rolex could allocate their limited supply of watches to their newly acquired Bucherer group, as well as limiting Watches of Switzerland's ability to open new locations. This would really shake up the industry. Rolex announced that their agreement with Bucherer is most advantageous option, not just for themselves, but also for the entire sector. They assert that Bucherer will still manage independently. Now, the thing about luxury watches and selling luxury watches is that the economy of it is really interesting. I really actually quite like it and find it interesting because when you go into the stores, Rolex now has the ability to put their watches front and center, to give priority to their watches at all time, at all costs. But whenever they do sell another manufacturer watches, Rolex gets a percentage. I love this market. Seriously, the luxury watches market is not going anywhere. Whenever recessions hit, whenever these things happen, sometimes they're affected, but it is such a predictable and strong market to be in. That's it for this video. Thank you for watching, subscribe, and I'll see you in our next video.